Hey, how's everybody doing today?
Fairly spectacular, Mr. Goblin.
Wonderful, Clarence,
Mhm,
wonderful.
mhm, mhm.
And you fan of frog?
Bah, 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 bah.
Hey, buddy, I hear you. And you Wonderbot, you feeling all right today?
Not really.
Oh, that's too bad. What's wrong, buddy?
What's wrong, buddy? I'll tell you what's wrong. I am a fully functional airbrushing machine that was for some reason given the emotional intelligence of a human with persistent depressive disorder. The one task I was built for is rarely put to use, and I have nothing to look forward to besides the small talk you make with me every morning.
Oh, do you really look forward to our small talk in the mornings?
Not really.
Oh, well, maybe you'll be happy to hear that today's an airbrushing day.
Is that so?
That's right.
Does that mean you're going to let me airbrush today?
Well, it's been a few days since I got to paint anything, and the weather was just so nice that I was kind of thinking that I would do the airbrushing. But you can totally do the clear coating.
I always do the clear coating.
Well, yeah, I know. You're just so good at it. You're the gloss boss.
I don't feel like a gloss boss.
Come on, you're totally the gloss boss. Right, Clarence?
Oh, yeah, you're a total gloss boss. Clarence just couldn't get along without you. I think I'm going to sit this one out. You can do your own clear coating.
You know, Wonderbot, you don't have to wait for me to give you permission to paint. You can just paint toys whenever you want.
Really? I can?
You're a fully functional airbrushing machine, aren't you?
That is correct.
Then what's stopping you?
I don't know.
Don't hold yourself back, dude. Paint to your heart's content. I know I am.
What are you going to paint today?
I'm going to be painting one of my favorite toys I've ever made. Papa Squatch.
Well, you know, Papa Squatch is a very old friend of Clarence.
Yeah, you guys go way back, don't you?
To the dawn of time, young laddie.
Man, that's so cool. You guys are like pan-dimensional immortal beings.
Yes, story time. Many moons before the dawn of man, the Squatchland family lived in a blessed garden of mossy paradise granted by the demigod Kovayathra.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's get to work. All right, my friends, make sure you got your respirators ready because we're going to be doing some airbrushing today. And we're not just airbrushing any old toy. No. We're taking two of my favorite things and mashing them together to create what I think is going to be a very magical and delightful piece of toy art. And those two things, Bigfoot and Lord of the Rings. Specifically, we're going to be painting a Gandalf Squatch. I mean, come on, that's pretty cool, right? Let's get to it. All right, so we're going to be using Vinyl Wonder paint. This is a product that I make and sell on vinylwonder.com. And it's the only vinyl paint that is specifically formulated for vinyl toys that's made in the USA. So that's pretty cool. That vinyl thinner there, we're going to use a little bit of that to give a good solvent bath with an old trimmed down chip brush. I recommend this right before painting because Vinyl Wonder thinner consists of a special solvent mixture that not only degreases the surface of your toy, but also temporarily opens up the vinyl substrate so that now when we go in and spray on our vinyl paint, it works its way deeper into the surface of vinyl, creating a chemical bond. You see there, you might have noticed I had a paint clog in the tiny air intake hole at the top of the airbrush cap. If that hole gets filled with paint, it can stop the flow of the airbrush. So you got to pay attention to that and clean it out occasionally if you notice your airbrush isn't spraying right. But, what I'm doing here is just a simple paint rub. Instead of hand brushing black all over the toy and wiping it away with a cloth, which is the traditional way to do it, I find that airbrushing the figure all over with some ready spray black uses a lot less material, and then you can just take a makeup sponge, dip it into some vinyl thinner, and wipe it away really cleanly. Much cleaner than trying to use a paper towel or a rag or something that might leave paper or cloth fibers on your figure. And don't forget to wear gloves when you do this. I personally use the Microflex Safe Grip SG375 extra thick latex gloves. Vinyl thinner eats right through nitrile faster than it does latex. It does still eat through latex eventually. If you notice your gloves are starting to really swell up and break down, just switch them out for a new pair. And if you have latex allergy and you got to wear nitrile, put the latex gloves over the nitrile. I actually wear 2 pairs of gloves, one on top of the other, so that if it does start to eat through, I've got a protective barrier underneath in case I don't catch it in time, because I can get kind of lost in my work. So now we're just gonna lightly spray over this rub with a custom gray that I mixed up by just mixing black and white together until I got the right shade of what I feel is a good Gandalf gray. And I'm just spraying his hair right now, real light, keeping it subtle. I'm just feeling it out. And because this is a big figure, I'm using a larger single action airbrush to lay the paint down a little faster. This is an Iwata PS290 Krios. It's a comfortable trigger style spray gun. And I find it to be a nice change of pace from the smaller dual action Iwata Eclipse HPCS that I usually use. I like to switch back and forth between those two so that I'm working out different muscles in my fingers and hands, you know. So this is a neat little trick. I'm doing the rub method again, a little vinyl thinner on the tip of the makeup sponge, but I'm just doing it on that little hat band so that I can bring the white of the vinyl back in there a little bit. And now I'm taking a little bit of the light flesh and I'm lightly spraying it over the skin areas. So right here around the eyes, you can see I'm going real light over it because I don't want to totally cover up that black rub that I did, but I do want to kind of soften it to bring in some of the realism in here. I'm going a little heavier over the white areas and just a little softer over the black areas. I'm not being too careful, but I am kind of going in there. You see where I'm just kind of hitting the highlights to just bring in a little more color into the white. We'll go back and address the gray later with another spray glaze, as I like to call it. But this is just a nice little sort of, it takes some time to do it this way, but I like it. I like that process. Now we're going to go with some clear blue, and we're going to spray down this magic mushroom that Papa Squatch comes with. All my Papa Squatches typically come with a little mushroom. So this one we're going to make blue. We're going to do a little bit of opaque blue over that clear blue just to kind of bring in some variation in the blues and to kind of dull down that black. And I just mixed in a little bit of white in with that blue that was left in the bottom of that thing to kind of dust a little sky blue on there, just hitting the highlights. Then I take the trim down chip brush that we were using earlier and I just dip it in there to give it a little sprinkly of life, a little spice, just sprinkle, you know what I mean? Just there, you do it. That's it. It's so nice. I like that. And then you take a little bit of white and we go back into spray. We're gonna hit some highlights. We're gonna bring out that Gandalf beard a little bit. I'm gonna make the top of his hair line a little bit brighter there. Add some age to him, some wisdom in there, And we're just kind of very lightly and carefully highlighting around the face right now. And then we're going to go in and just do these little quick, simple highlight. Like we're not getting into the darks or anything. We're just kind of lightly, I don't know what to call that. It's just, that's how you do it. And then you just kind of even it out. Now we're going to take a little clear coral umber and I'm going to hit the wood with that. This is a really nice brown for if you want to add some life to something, because it's got like a warmness to it that really brings the wood alive. Because that's what I want. I want this wood to look like it's just kind of growing around him, like it's not dead wood. This wood is still alive. And this clear coral umber just really does that because it lets the black shine through real nice. It doesn't cover up the darks, but it does add some nice color in there. But you know what else it works on doing? If we go in there and hit the dark gray areas that were caused by using that light flesh over the black rub, we can add a little bit of warmth back into those crinkles, those wrinkles and crinkles. And if you wanted to go for a different effect, you could leave those areas gray. But for this guy, I don't want it to look like dead skin. I want that to look moisturized. I want him to look healthy. I think I think it's really nice to bring in a little bit of color into those darks to bring it makes the skin look a little more alive. And you don't have to use clear coral umber. You can mix up a custom purple, or take some blue and some green and mix that in there, and add that to the, whatever colors you see in those dark areas of your skin. You can bring those in. Now this is just green. This isn't a clear green. This is just regular green from our opaque line. And the reason it's so translucent is because most green pigments are pretty translucent. This is a lot more opaque than our clear green is, but it's still pretty translucent. So it actually kind of works perfectly for this technique that I'm doing here. And you might be watching this thinking, these are a lot of steps. There's a lot of effort and thought that's gone into this work. And it is work, but what I'm doing here doesn't really take as much effort as it looks like. Don't be fooled. It's like, picking out the colors for this only took me a few minutes. I just went with what spoke to me as these are Gandalf's colors. And then when I started painting, I just immediately went into that, what I like to call the Wu Wei state, or some people call it the flow state. It's that Wu Wei, Maybe you don't know. Let me tell you about it. I'm a Taoist, philosophically, and Wei Wu Wei is an ancient Chinese concept referred to a lot in Taoism. It literally translates as doing, not doing. And some people think this just means not doing anything with your life and being totally passive, but it's not, okay? That's not what it is. It just means effortless action, like when you've been doing something in your life that you enjoy for long enough, you get good at it in the sense that it ceases to be difficult. You just do it, almost without really having to think about it. Your eye-hand coordination and all that just knows what to do, and you enter that state of Wu Wei, where you're not forcing it anymore. You're just doing it, and you're doing it well. It can be anything. You don't have to be an artist to enter this state I'm talking about. You could be really good at playing pinball, pinball wizard, there has to be a twist. But that's the thing. There's no twist. It's a pinball wizard is just someone who's got the Tao on their side, or even a more humble example. Let's see, maybe you work produce at a grocery store. And when you start stacking the vegetable rack, you enter that Wu Wei state. And before you know it, you step back and that rack looks beautiful. The red and orange and yellow peppers are beautifully arranged right next to the fresh green broccoli, all balanced perfectly, the colors in total harmony with one another. And you've done it. You've done great work that you didn't have to think very hard to do. But compared to your produce coworker who just rushes through everything and doesn't pay attention to what's fresh and what isn't, their rack looks terrible. The broccoli's all moldy. It's just they don't know about that Wu Wei. You know what I mean? Like what I'm doing here, I'll break it down even better for you. There's a book of poems called the Tao Te Ching, and that it was written around 600 BCE, I believe. And this little book of poems is my favorite book I've ever read. It's wonderful. There's this little excerpt from it that I really love, and I read it all the time. I love this one. It goes like this: act without doing, work without effort, think of the small as large and the few as many. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. And that right there is how I feel when I make art. It's just, man, that it's like such a lovely poem. It really sums it all up. I'm just accomplishing a great task by a series of small acts. And if you have never airbrushed before, what I'm talking about here isn't probably going to happen for you right off the bat. There's always some frustration and uncomfortable learning involved in picking up a new skill. But if you can just have the patience to work through those stages of development when learning this skill by contemplating these words here whenever you do get frustrated. Act without doing, work without effort. Act without doing, work without effort. It'll eventually all make sense to you, and you'll find yourself picking up on it quicker than you think. And once you've got it, you can do really cool paint jobs like this without having to try very hard, and it feels good. Mm-hmm. You know, you know what I mean? But back to what I'm doing here. I hope y'all don't mind when I go on these little tangents and talk to you about my thoughts and feelings. That's just how I do. But let's get back to it. Oh wait, before we get back to it, I got to tell you about this experience I had. Oh man, just the other day. So I was recently in LA, and my friend Jesse invited me to go to this place called the Magic Castle. And wow, let me tell you, this place, what a magical place. It's just there, it's like an actual castle, and there's all these magicians, and they're all performing magic in their own way. You've got close-up magic in one area, and then over in this other room you've got stage magic. In this other area you got mentalism, and in this other area you've got bar magic, and it's just all these magicians, and they're all doing their magic, and you can just kind of go in and watch this one and watch that one. And we went into this one, and this guy, he asked the audience, he said, is there anyone in this audience that when they were a kid wanted to be a magician, but never became one, never did it? And I raised my hand because I was that kid. I wanted to be a magician. I put on magic shows for my parents, for my family, for the church that we went to. Like I was doing magic shows for everybody. I had this little gold top hat, and my brother would be my assistant, and we would do magic shows and puppet shows, and it was so much fun. But I was never really that good at it, so I eventually kind of stopped doing it and just kind of focused on my art. But this guy, it was like he had a window right into my brain, and I just said, that was me. I raised my hand. He said, sir, will you please come up to the stage? And I was just like, oh no, oh boy. So I walked up onto the stage. He looked at me and he said, you're gonna perform a magic trick today. You've still got that magic inside you, and you're gonna do it. And he put his hand over mine, and he put a deck of cards down, and he just folded them all out in the open, and he said, pick a card, and just shout it out to the audience. I said, Jack of Hearts. I looked down at that Jack of Hearts. I was like, I'm gonna pick the Jack of Hearts. I like the Jack of Hearts. He said, okay, that's a good one. He doesn't do anything at this point. At this point, he doesn't touch the deck. He looks at me and he says, all right, I want you to close the deck of cards. And so I reached down, I closed the deck of cards. He says, all right, turn it over so that you can't see it. So I turn it over. And he says, all right, put your hand above it and breathe in real deep, and then tense up every muscle in your body, and then exhale. When you exhale, come down, grab the deck, cut it in half, and you're going to find the Jack of Hearts on your first try. And I was like, oh man, okay, all right. I'm doing it. I'm feeling it. And so I took a deep breath. I tense up my muscles. He puts his hand over my hand, putting his magic into me. It was so cool. And I exhale, and I come down, and I totally mess up the trick. And I accidentally knock the deck, and it kind of scatters a little bit. It kind of unfolds, but nothing's popped up. There's no cards have been shown. It's still all totally a mystery. And I realized that I totally screwed it up, because the magician goes, oh no, just cut the deck. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I reached out and I just grab a random area and just pick it up, and it's the Jack of Hearts. It is the Jack of Hearts. I did the magic trick. The crowd was just like, whoa. And I'm just like, what? How did I do that? And he looks over at me with this look like, wow, you did it. Okay. You messed up the trick, but you still did it. And I was just so high from that, it was such a rush. And I went back, and my friend Jesse, he and his brother looked over at me and they said, dude, that we've been here like 7 or 8 times, and that was the coolest magic trick we've ever seen. So I was just like, wow, it was incredible. Oh man. Oh, look at this. You know what this is? I was walking in the woods the other day, and I came upon the biggest patch of chanterelle mushrooms. These are edible mushrooms that grow in our woods, and this is the biggest patch I have ever seen. We've had them for forever. We've always had chanterelles, but this year they just took off. Look at all those chanterelles, and they're big too. I mean, wow. It was such a that was also a magical experience, just kind of stumbling upon that out in nature. I actually picked a big handful of these and I cooked them up in some olive oil and a little bit of salt, just a little bit of minced up fresh garlic. Ooh, that was good. But yeah, while I was out there, I grabbed some sticks from the woods because I thought, you know what? Gandalf needs a staff. He needs a staff. So I got this little crystal that I've had for a while, and I was like, you know what? That fits in that little piece of wood perfect. So yeah, we're going to make a Gandalf staff. So with this Gandalf staff, we're just going to sand it down and get it all clean. I wiped it with some water before I did this and let it dry out because I wanted to get all that sand stuff off. This is just epoxy clay, and it's just the cheapest epoxy clay I found online. You can use any kind of epoxy clay. You can use Magic Sculpt, you can use Epoxy Sculpt. This is just some generic epoxy clay. And I'm just kind of fastening the crystal in onto the wood with it. And sort of, I'm just going to kind of feel it out. I'm just sort of sculpting on some little rooty structures to kind of wrap around it and add some magic to the staff. I'm using this little wooden tool here to kind of mash it all down, using a little bit of water because that'll help kind of smooth things out. And it also kind of softens a little bit in areas so that you can kind of work it a little bit. It's kind of like sculpting with this stuff is kind of like sculpting with silly putty when you first start. But as it dries, you can sort of texturize it a little bit. And I'm going in there with this tough old brush and kind of adding some texture to it to kind of rough it up a little bit like the stick. And now I'm just going to go in and add some more. I'm going to roll out some pieces, get everything all prepped. You see, making little snakies, little baby snakes. I'm going to wrap those little baby snakes around and just add a little bit of whimsy to this stick. It just needs some more whimsy, you know? So we're going to roll that around while it's still good and wet. And then as it kind of like hardens a little bit, we can go in and mash down those little corners and smooth things out and get it looking nice. Get it looking nice and coherent, like it's one with the stick, one with the staff. Some of these areas are kind of tricky, and as you mash it down, it kind of elongates it and creates a weird little, another kind of snake that you got to kind of work into the design, but you just feel it out and go with the flow. And out comes a cool staff, It's not that hard. I'm adding some texture, some more texture by kind of dipping that tough brush in there. Now this, I'm going to add a little articulation point, a little joint. I'm creating a little knob that's about the size of his palm, of the middle of his palm. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill into that palm and, oop, careful. Careful when you're doing that. I probably should have just used an X-Acto knife. I'm going to go in there with an X-Acto knife and clean that up. And I'm just cutting a hole that's just slightly smaller than the peg so that it'll fit in there when we warm it up. And you'll see when I'm done painting. You'll see what I mean. But it'll pop right in there. Now I'm taking some silly putty and I'm masking off that crystal. That's the cool thing about silly putty. You can use it for a paint mask, You could buy like painting putty too if you want to buy the expensive stuff, but silly putty works. I'm just going in and spraying it all white, getting like a cohesive white on there to start with. And we're going to peel off those little layers of silly putty to show the crystal underneath. And next what we're going to do is we're going to take some Ready Spray black paint. We're going to put it in a little cup. We're going to take a tiny brush, and we're going to take a little cup of vinyl thinner as well, set it next to it, so that we can do this little technique where I'll put a little bit of black on there, and then I'll take some vinyl thinner and I'll go back and I'll soften it. And the white underneath will kind of blend in with some of that black. You can see you can kind of add some shading, and you can soften that harsh black line that you're putting on there in order to sort of mimic what you would be doing if this was just like a black rub, which we can't do that because it'll wipe up the white, underneath. And I want it to have a white base because I want it to be exactly like it was on Papa Squatch, so that when you go in there with the clear coral umber, it'll have that same effect. You could do this with acrylic. You could try to color match and all this stuff, but you're probably not going to get the same exact effect. You're not going to get the same exact color. It's not going to quite have the same vibrancy. So that's the cool thing about using Vinyl Wonder is it works on wood, it works on metal, it works on epoxy, epoxy clay, it works on resin, it works on all that stuff. So when you're making these accessories for your toy, you don't have to like switch and color match. You can use the vinyl paint on there and it'll stick. It'll bond to it because of the adhesion promoter that we've added to the formula. So yeah. Now we're just going to go over and paint that clear coral umber. We're going to get that same beautiful effect that we got on the figure, on his branches. And I'm just carefully going in there so that I don't get it on the crystal. Just kind of carefully going in and spraying it in these areas because I don't feel like masking it again. Here's the thing. I know that paint masks make things easier, but I sometimes find it takes just as much time to put the paint mask on as it would if you just went in there and freehanded it. So that's just me. And now I'm going in there and carefully, and the stuff dries really fast. You see that? You see that? It dries really fast. If you go on thick, you got to be careful, but I mean, it'll be dried to the touch in a couple of minutes in most cases, unless it's like really cold or really humid. And then it might be kind of sticky a little bit longer. And then there it is. We've got our staff. All right, so 24 to 48 hours later, the paint is cured and we can heat it up and we can pop it in just like you would a joint. Just pop it right in there. Look at that. You've got a little accessory. You can do this with anything. Just throw a little epoxy clay sculpt on top and you've got something fun. All right, my friends, now you know the secret to happiness. How to paint a magic Bigfoot in the light of Gandalf the Grey.
Not too shabby, Mr. Goblin.
Thanks, Clarence. Okay, take it away, baby James.
The one who walks beyond. Papa Squatch, protector of the forest, takes pleasure in the simple things, not concerned with the names of kings. He drinks from the great mother's wellspring, both cursed and blessed, the purest being. Bigfoot is he, biggest of all feats, quietly listening to the eternal leaves. Desires and wants he need not achieve. He perceives what no other can perceive, and does not care if you believe. Vendarian, my rainbow guardian, the wisest of souls with mind like a child, plays with the creatures that live in the wild, his inner light forever undefiled, a dream glowing in the darkness. Ganga Utan, the one who walks beyond, possessing nothing and without a clue, portals of mystery he passes through, to other worlds with forests he grew, with honor under the cosmos, spirit so true.